he found a starving mother hiding in his barn, but refused to feed her until she told the truth. The first time he saw her, she was curled like a wounded animal in the corner of his barn, shivering beneath a torn quilt that didn't belong to him and breathing like each inhale was a stolen thing. Ragged, shallow, almost defiant. Caleb didn't reach for his gun. He didn't shout. He just stared from the open doorway, steam rising from the coffee tin in his hand as sunlight filtered through the slats, catching the dust in lazy gold lines that made the moment feel too quiet. The cow lowed nervously. A horse stomped once. She didn't move, but he saw the flick of her eyes under that blanket, sharp, scared, and far too tired to fake bravery. She had a baby tucked against her chest, bundled in rags and straw. The kind of makeshift cradle that screamed desperation louder than any words. Caleb stepped inside slowly, boots crunching dry hay, and stopped 4 paces away. "You ain't from around here?" he said flatly. She didn't answer. He glanced down at the rusted tin cup by her side, empty, then at the crumbs near her feet, barely a meal. "I got 2 rules," he said, voice low and even. "Don't steal from me, and don't lie to me." She didn't flinch, didn't nod, just stared like a woman halfway between fight and surrender. "You broke both already," he added. She whispered something, voice thin as thread. "He's hungry." Caleb's jaw tightened. Ain't no shortage of hungry out here. Still, he turned and walked out, leaving the barn door wide. He didn't slam it, didn't lock it, just let the wind do what it would. 10 minutes later, he came back with a crust of bread and set it on a beam just within reach. But before she could take it, he crouched and met her eyes. "No name, no truth, no bread," he said. Her fingers trembled, but didn't move. The baby let out a small cry, dry and weak. And then, slowly, like peeling back skin, she whispered, "Eliza." The baby's Levi. Caleb nodded once, left the bread, and walked away without another word. She didn't eat it right away, not until the sun had shifted and his shadow no longer touched the barn floor, not until she knew he wasn't coming back to take it away. When she did, she wept between each bite. She hadn't meant to run this far. The road had twisted out longer than her strength, and the baby had grown heavier by the hour. Eliza had followed the creek bed until her legs buckled and she couldn't feel her feet anymore, then veered toward the shape of a barn through the freezing dusk like a moth toward smoke. But even now, wrapped in borrowed hay and regret, she remembered every mile of what she'd left behind. Levi's father had been kind for a month, maybe 2. Then came the whiskey, the fists, the freezing silences. The child was never wanted. Neither was she. The last thing her husband said, before he passed out with his boots on and a belt in hand, was that he hoped the coyotes found her before sunrise. So she packed a worn satchel and ran. She told herself she didn't care if she died out here, as long as Levi had a chance. But the truth was, she did care, more than she could admit to anyone, even herself. Inside the barn now, she shifted Levi higher against her chest and closed her eyes, listening for footsteps, for breath, for mercy. None came, not for hours. She watched the beams change color as the light moved, trying to guess what kind of man the cowboy was. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't dragged her out. He'd brought bread, and he'd said her name back to her like it meant something. That was more than she'd been given in over a year. By the time the barn door creaked open again, she nearly jumped. But it was just him, the rancher, Caleb. He didn't look at her at first, just checked the feed barrels and tools like she wasn't there. Then he tossed something small into the straw beside her, an old canteen. "It's clean," he said simply. Don't waste it. She reached with shaking fingers and nodded. He paused at the stall gate. You got a plan? She didn't. Just west, she said. Somewhere warm. You're holding a baby and wearing shoes with holes, he replied. West'll kill you by the second ridge. She didn't argue. There was nothing left to defend. He turned to leave again, but this time his voice softened. I'll feed the boy once, that's all. After that, you either walk out or speak straight. Then he was gone. She bit her lip and looked down at Levi's face. He'd stopped crying, but not because he was full. He was too weak for sound now. Eliza knew then. One more night alone, and he wouldn't wake up. Caleb Keller wasn't a cruel man, but mercy hadn't done him many favors in this life. The last stranger he'd helped rode off with his best mare and left him a bullet crease across the ribs. Before that, a family he fed through winter stole his tools and sold them in town. Folks called him soft-hearted until the day he wasn't. And since then, the line was simple. Truth first, help second. So when he stepped back into the barn with a tin bowl of warmed milk and a slice of salted cornbread, he didn't hand it to her. He set it on the ground between them like an unspoken deal laid in plain sight. Eliza stared, eyes pleading more for Levi than for herself. But she didn't reach. Caleb leaned against a post, arms crossed. Start with where you're coming from, he said, not where you're going. She swallowed hard. Carson Ridge. Too far to walk with a child? How'd you get this far? I was carried for part of the way, she murmured. Caleb's brows lowered. By who? Her throat closed. For a moment she couldn't speak, but then, by him, when he still loved us. The cowboy said nothing, just nudged the bowl slightly closer with his boot. Eliza took a breath that shook more than it should have. He wasn't always like that, she said. At first he sang to the baby, built a cradle, promised land and a home. Then winter came. Land failed, money dried up, and so did his kindness. Caleb's jaw tightened. A lot of men quit when things get heavy. She nodded, tears stinging. He tried to sell me, not to survive, just to drink again. I left when he passed out. Silence settled between them, thick as pine sap. The only sound was Levi's soft whimper. Caleb crouched then, not close, but level, eyes steady and without pity. Why my barn? She met his gaze. Because every window in town was lit, but no one opened their door. That answer hit him deeper than she knew. He looked at Levi, then at her cracked lips, then back at the bowl. He picked it up, dipped his finger in warm milk, and touched it gently to the baby's mouth. Levi suckled weakly. Eliza's shoulders shook in silent relief. Caleb passed her the bowl, not fully, just enough that she had to take it herself. You're eating tonight, he said, voice rough. But don't mistake kindness for permission. Eliza blinked through tears. I'll leave at sunrise. Caleb stood and shook his head. No, you'll speak the rest first. Then he walked out, leaving the door ajar, drawing a line she hadn't expected. He wasn't keeping her out. He was keeping her from running. The bread was rough and dry, but tasted like the first true thing Eliza had known in weeks. And she chewed it slowly, afraid to finish too quickly, as if the meal might vanish if she didn't earn every bite. Levi stirred against her chest, a faint color returning to his cheeks. She dipped the crust in the milk, softening it enough for the child's tiny mouth, whispering thanks she hadn't learned how to pray properly in years. Outside the barn, Caleb worked the fence line like it was any other day, hammering rails, checking nails, moving with a calmness that made her ache. hadn't asked for pity, hadn't offered any either. But something in his silence felt more honest than kindness. That night, the wind picked up. She tucked Levi into her coat and wedged herself deeper into the straw, but it wasn't enough. Before she could close her eyes, the barn door creaked open again, and Caleb stepped inside with a folded wool blanket. "Won't warm much," he said, setting it near the stall gate. "But it's dry." Eliza didn't thank him, didn't know how to say it without it sounding like a bribe. Instead, she just asked softly, "Why help now?" Caleb paused, hands in his pockets. "Because you finally told me your name, and it didn't sound like a lie." She swallowed. "You asked for the truth, and I still am." He leaned against the post, voice low. "Where's your people, Eliza?" She hesitated, then answered, "Buried with my mother, or married off too far east to remember me." "And the man who tried to sell you?" "Gone. Dead, maybe. Or worse, not." Caleb gave a slow nod. "You planning on staying here?" Her breath caught. "Not unless you say so." He stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough to see the baby's face. "You fed him right. You told the truth. That earns a night. After that." He didn't finish. Eliza looked down at Levi, then back at him. "I'll work. I can clean, mend. I know how to care for stock." Caleb's brow lifted. "That's so. I ran the animals while he drank." She looked him in the eye. "I won't be a burden. Just don't make me run again." For a long beat, Caleb said nothing. Then quietly, "Get some rest. And tomorrow, you show me what your word's worth." As he turned to leave, she whispered, "Thank you." He stopped in the doorway. "You said your name. Now tell me the baby's full name." She smiled softly. "Levi Daniel, after my father." Caleb nodded once. Good name. And with that, he closed the door, not locked, not shut all the way. Just closed enough to let the warmth stay in. The wind shifted the dust like an omen that afternoon. And Caleb knew before he even saw the shadow crest the far ridge that something was wrong. Eliza had been hanging laundry behind the barn, her sleeves rolled, cheeks flushed with the rare comfort of rhythm. Levi was asleep in the cradle Caleb had carved from salvaged wood. And the girls, Mary and Ruth, quiet twins that clung to Eliza like second skin, were peeling potatoes by the water trough when they froze mid-motion. Caleb followed their line of sight. A rider, black coat, hat low, moving slow, too slow for someone just passing through. Caleb's stomach dropped. He grabbed the rifle from the porch corner but didn't raise it yet. "Inside," he said quietly. Eliza didn't ask questions. She scooped Levi up and ushered the girls into the cabin. Caleb stayed in the yard, dust swirling around his boots as the rider came into full view. Not a stranger, not to her. The man reined in, gaze locked on the cabin. "She here?" he asked. Caleb said nothing. "My wife and my boy. They belong to me." Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle, but he kept it low. "Belong?" he repeated. "Ain't no chains on her feet now." The man laughed. "That so? Well, she left with my name and my child. That don't wash clean just 'cause you fed her." The screen door creaked open behind them. Eliza stepped out, trembling but firm. "We're not yours anymore, Sam." The rider's jaw tensed. "You think he's gonna protect you? Feed all them mouths when his harvest dries? You think this cabin makes you safe?" Caleb finally raised the rifle, steady. "I think she's already safer than she ever was with you." Sam's eyes flicked to the barrel, then to Eliza. "I came for the boy." "Then you came to fail," Caleb said. "He's got a name now. A family, too." For a long moment, the wind held its breath. Sam looked between them, calculating. Then he spat in the dirt, turned his horse, and rode off without another word. Only when the dust settled did Eliza sag against the porch railing. Caleb lowered the rifle. "You all right?" She nodded. "He'll be back." Caleb looked out at the horizon. So will the harvest, so will the hard days. But next time, we stand together. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. Not from fear, but from something dangerously close to hope. That night, the wind stayed silent. Like even the plains knew not to disturb the quiet between them. Inside the cabin, Levi lay curled on the folded wool blanket, cheeks flushed with sleep, while Mary and Ruth dozed side by side near the hearth, their small hands still clutched in each other's. Eliza moved slowly, her feet bare against the floorboards, and when she sat at the kitchen table, her shoulders didn't sag from fear this time. They rested with the weight of having stayed. Caleb poured 2 cups of coffee and didn't speak as he handed her one. "You think he'll come back?" she asked after a long moment. "Maybe," Caleb said, "but he won't get through me." She studied him across the table. "Why?" He blinked, brow furrowed. "Why what? Why would you fight for someone you didn't even know a month ago?" Caleb didn't answer at first. He looked at the floor, then out the window, where the moonlight cut long stripes across the earth. "Because I know what it means to be left in the cold, with nobody coming back. Because when I saw you feeding those kids scraps in that alley, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, someone still trying, even when there's nothing left." Eliza swallowed hard. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to stay." "You don't have to know yet," Caleb said gently. "You just have to stop running." Her voice cracked. "What if I don't know how?" Caleb reached across the table, not to touch her hand, but just to place his palm near hers. "Then I'll wait, right here." The fire popped, soft and steady. Outside, the wind shifted again, warmer this time. She glanced at the cabin walls, the shelves lined with jars she'd filled, the floor she'd scrubbed, the boots by the door she'd lined up without realizing. It didn't feel like a shelter anymore. It felt like something forming. "When I got here," she whispered, "I was just trying to keep my kids alive." Caleb nodded. "Now you're living too." She looked up at him, tears welling but not falling. "I was never allowed to belong anywhere." "You do now," Caleb said. "And not 'cause I gave you a roof, 'cause you claimed it." Outside, the chickens stirred and settled again, and for the first time, Eliza didn't jump at the noise. She sipped her coffee slowly, hand still close to his. "I want to believe you." "Then stay long enough to prove me right." Eliza woke before the sun, the way mothers often do when the air shifts and something unseen whispers change is coming. She stood at the window, arms folded, watching the sky shift from slate to gold. Caleb had already gone out. She could hear the distant, rhythmic thud of an axe splitting wood and the muffled cluck of chickens being tended. In the soft warmth of morning, the house smelled like ash and bread, and her children still slept tangled in one another's arms near the fire. But Eliza didn't feel trapped anymore. She felt rooted. She moved quietly through the house, touching each sleeping child's forehead, then stepped outside barefoot, the grass cool against her skin. Caleb straightened when he saw her. "You sleep?" he asked gently. "Some," she said. "You?" "Not much." There was no apology in either voice, only a shared understanding that peace and sleep didn't come easy to people like them, not at first. He handed her a folded piece of parchment. Sheriff came by before dawn. Said he saw your old man headed north, drunk and mean. Her throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. So he's still looking. Caleb nodded. But he won't find this place. And even if he does, he won't take us. She finished for him, not as a question. She glanced toward the open gate, the one Caleb had never closed since the night he carried them in. You never shut it, she said softly. Didn't seem right, Caleb said. Places that heal shouldn't have locks. She turned to him, really looked at him. His face was lined with early sunlight, every crease earned, not carved. You built this place for yourself, she said. But you left room for others. Didn't know I did, he admitted, until I saw you here. The wind caught her hair. She stepped forward, placed a hand lightly on his chest. We're not just passing through anymore, Caleb. His hand came up to rest over hers. I know. She glanced toward the barn. We should get it ready. I was thinking a little classroom corner in the loft for the kids. Some shelves. Blankets for winter. I'll build it, he said immediately. And maybe, she added, her voice soft, some extra room, in case someone else like us comes along. Caleb smiled slowly. I reckon there's always room. And as they turned back toward the house, the sun climbed over the ridge behind them, setting the open gate aglow like a welcome that had been waiting all along. The first snow came fast that year, blanketing the high fields and pinching the wind sharp by mid-afternoon. But the cabin held steady. Thick logs chinked with care, wood stacked high and dry under the porch, and the hearth inside never went cold. Eliza bundled Levi close to her chest, while Mary and Ruth pressed their noses to the frosted window pane, watching the flakes drift down like a lullaby. In the corner, Caleb stood over a stew pot, sleeves rolled, stirring with quiet purpose. This ain't what I thought winter would be, Eliza said softly, and Caleb glanced at her with a half smile. Me neither. But I'll take it. They ate slowly that night, not in silence, but in peace. Laughter rose once when Ruth made up a song about their stubborn old hen, and even Caleb chuckled, a rare, rusted sound, finally free. After dinner, as the wind howled outside, they all sat near the fire, huddled under one quilt. Eliza stitched a hole in Levi's tiny sock, while Caleb read from an old, dog-eared book of fables he'd found buried in a trunk. The children leaned against him like he'd always been their anchor. And maybe, in time, he was. Later, after the little ones had been tucked onto pallets by the fire, Eliza lingered on the porch in her shawl, watching the moon cast long shadows over the snow-blanketed yard. Caleb joined her, coat draped over his shoulders, 2 mugs of tea in hand. You thinking of leaving again? He asked quietly. No, she said quickly. Not ever. I'm just amazed. I didn't know this kind of quiet existed. He nodded. Neither did I. Not the kind that doesn't come from loneliness. They sipped their tea in companionable silence. After a long pause, Eliza murmured, We're building something, aren't we? Yeah, Caleb said, and we started with nothing but broken pieces. She smiled. Those make the strongest walls. In the stillness, the gate creaked slightly in the wind, but it stayed open, a silent promise. And inside the warm cabin, the children slept soundly, never stirring once, even as the world outside turned cold. Caleb had always known how to work with horses, mend fences, and read the land like scripture. But looking someone in the eye when it mattered most, that was something he hadn't mastered, not until that day. The snow was melting just enough to turn the pasture into thick brown soup, and the morning sun hit the yard with a golden glare that made everything look newer than it was. Eliza stood beside the barn holding Levi, watching the girls chase chickens in their stitched boots and oversized coats. Caleb came out with his sleeves rolled and a knot in his throat that hadn't been there since spring. He'd planned to check the fence posts on the south side, maybe cut some new rails, but his boots slowed halfway down the porch. He watched her. Not just her figure or the way she cradled the baby, but the softness around her eyes. The curve of her tired smile, the quiet endurance that didn't ask for thanks. "You never asked for anything," he said out loud, startling even himself. Eliza turned, brows raised. "Neither did you," she replied. "But you gave more than you knew you had." Caleb stepped closer. "I was afraid," he admitted, "that if I looked too close, I'd see something I wasn't worthy of." She studied him a moment, then said gently, "And what do you see now?" He swallowed. "A family. One I don't want to run from anymore." He reached for Levi, and Eliza handed the boy over without hesitation. Caleb held the child close, his calloused hand cradling the back of the baby's head like it was the most fragile thing in the world. "They're not just yours," he said finally. "They're mine too, if you'll let me stay." Eliza nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "We've been waiting for you to say that, Caleb. Not with words, but with your eyes." And for the first time since he'd opened his door to them, Caleb truly saw her. Not as a guest, not as a burden, not even as someone he'd saved, but as the home he hadn't known he needed. Behind them, the children laughed, a sound full of roots. And in that moment, beneath the clean sky and the scent of wet earth, they all belonged. By spring, the trees around the cabin had begun to bud, their branches dotted with green like tiny flags of surrender to life. The last of the snow had melted, leaving muddy trails behind the barn, but no one seemed to mind. Caleb knelt by the porch, fixing the steps that had started to sag, while Ruth handed him nails one by one with quiet seriousness. Inside, Mary stirred a pot of stew under Eliza's gentle guidance, and Levi rolled on a blanket nearby, giggling every time the wooden spoon slipped from his sister's hand. The cabin, once hollow with silence, pulsed with the rhythm of a home that had decided to keep breathing. That evening, as the fire cracked and the windows glowed soft gold, Caleb carried in a small wooden cradle he'd built in the barn, each rail carved with care, each edge smooth as riverstone. "For Levi," he said, setting it near the hearth. Eliza stepped forward, running her fingers along the rim. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's steady." Caleb's eyes found hers, and for once, they held there, unblinking. "So are you." The children piled in after supper, Mary insisting on brushing her hair, Ruth claiming the spot closest to the fire. And when Levi finally drifted off in the cradle Caleb had made, Eliza sat beside him and just watched his chest rise and fall. Caleb joined her, their knees nearly touching. "I used to think I was just meant to fix things," he said. "Broken fences, stray horses, busted doors, that's all I knew." She turned her head, rested it lightly on his shoulder. "And now? Now I think I was meant to build things too." Her fingers found his, slow, unsure, but certain in their final choice. "You already have." Outside, the wind had gone quiet again, as if even nature had decided not to interrupt. Inside, the fire burned steady. It wasn't just warmth, it was proof. Not of rescue or survival, but of a new kind of belonging that no one needed to earn. And for the first time in either of their lives, home wasn't a place to reach. It was the fire between them. and the promise it would always stay lit. Like, comment, and share it with someone who believes in earned redemption. Subscribe for more full-length Frontier stories and explore our channel for tales that stay with you.